beautiful October morning. Just a little bit chilly. Squirrels and birds are chirping. Just a little bit of coolness, even though it's not real cold. It's already got that little bit of a chill effect that wakes us up. And our surroundings, not just the sounds and the light and what we see, but also what we experience with the climate and whatnot, really affects our body physically and mentally. And the chill and a little bit of cold is really nice because we want to experience a certain amount of that, because it really helps turn on some things in our body, and it helps our mind focus towards the present moment. We're naturally geared to be very aware of any kind of cold temperatures, and obviously the colder it gets, things like adrenaline can start to pump. And then if it gets, we start getting to dangerously cold situations, a lot of things start to activate in the body. But just as awareness, a nice crisp, cool morning can really assist the mindfulness or whatever. Just it's a helpful thing. But anyhow, with that, being in the present moment and being aware, it really gets to the point of ourself. And there's a concept, it's called the id and the ego, and I forget, the superego and whatever, but that's just a model that was created in the 20th century, I think by Freud, to try and help us understand how the different parts of our consciousness and our mind and subconsciousness all work together to create a sense of who we are. But it's not really a complete model by any sense, and it's not even really very well founded in any kind of real neuroscience. But it is a good model to just help us simplify the way we think about ourselves. But the self and who we are is really a bit more complex, and our self is all these identifying things that we are passionate about, things that we're talented in, things that we don't like, past experiences, etc. All of these things. And what we're really trying to do is do more than not have a big ego or have a little ego or this or that or other. It's to have a healthy sense of self. You are Adeline. And that's really important, to say, where do I fit best in the world? Where do I feel like my talents and who I am are best used? And where am I comfortable? And where am I making progress? And every one human being in this world has some life path, and just because somebody's on television and they're famous doesn't mean that their life is any more important than the person who you never hear anything about at all. It's just that every life path is one individual life path. And they'll have a lot of crossovers and intersections and comparisons to other lives. And that's important to know, is that there are patterns, and you can identify where one pattern took one person, so that maybe we can become cognizant of whether or not we might be on the similar path, and we don't want to go down that path, or it was a good path and we would like to kind of go down a similar path. It's certain life events do create a similar kind of pattern for different people, but still every life path is its own. And so that's that self-awareness and developing a healthy sense of self, which is kind of like a lot of pieces. It's not just like one thing. Also, we have to be very careful about the common language that gets used in the popular media, and you'll hear it in popular culture, and people just using these words and things randomly without thought behind them in, like, say, school or work or whatever. And I'm going to just use an example, is because of the ego. I was talking about the ego. People will say, "Oh, he or she's got a big ego," or we shouldn't have a big ego, or we shouldn't have a healthy, where we need to have a healthy ego. But really, you got to be careful, because a lot of people don't really even understand what they're saying when they're saying that. It's about you and having a healthy sense of you. Now, the ego is not a real thing. It's just a helpful model of something. There's no real ego in your brain. There's a you. And when we start talking about the sense of self and if what the ego was meant to represent, even though we don't want to have the big ego, in other words, that we're central to everything and all of that was what people think of when they talk about the ego. But the real dangerous thing that they don't talk about, because it's not real well understood, is having no ego, no sense of self. That's the real danger. That's when people are adrift and if they don't have a sense of self, it's also hard for them to understand that their actions are harming other people or harming themselves. When we lose the healthy sense of self, it'd be much better to have a big ego, like Tom Brady, who's known to be humble for his role, but as a football player, he's very open about saying, he had his chip on his shoulder. Usually when we say we have a chip on our shoulder, people think that's being an outrageous big ego. Well, within the circumstances of him being a great football player, that was helpful to him. Now, not in every aspect of his life. You gotta be careful about that, right? Like what he is as a football player isn't the same as everything else he does in his life. But as a football player, he had a big ego a big healthy ego as a football player that pushed him to work really hard at being a football player. And there was nothing wrong with that. It was the appropriate environment for having a big ego. Had he had no ego, he would never have been a great football player, because he wouldn't have valued himself. So a healthy ego, but even better said, a healthy sense of who you are. And that's a continuously work in progress, little patterns, little habits, taking care of yourself, your body and your mind and your diet, how you eat, how you think, and how you exercise your mind, just like you would exercise your body to be strong, doing mindfulness exercises, and constantly being aware that your surroundings are always, it's always a pressure on you, and it's always working on you, and it could be pushing you in a good direction. It could be trying to push on you in a negative direction, and if you develop the right mental skills as you grow up, and you got to really take advantage of the time when you're young. There's a lot to put on a young person, but some people they're in a position where they got to do more for themselves than other people, and it doesn't make it better or worse for the long term. But it's important to understand that this stuff is connected to actual physical development in the brain too. So it's never too early to start developing the skills of developing a healthy self, and you got to do that independently to a large extent. Now, I mean, do it independently. That doesn't mean you don't seek other helpful people to help be part of that process, but it's still your life. It's you, and so trying to identify people who are really trying to do good things, and the people who are also taking care of their minds and their bodies, their spirit, and seeing that they are doing that and knowing they're doing that, and not fakely. There's a lot, and that's another whole thing. So many people who are doing the exact opposite of really what's healthy and good, promote themselves as doing what's healthy and good. So now you got that a whole issue to try and decipher through. But if they're putting things into their body, or they're not making they're not producing things that look like they will help other people, that they're doing things that only seem to help themselves. Now, when you help other people, you typically also help yourself. But when people are acting in a way that only looks like it's trying to help themselves, and it's not really giving anything back out to other people, or it's taking advantage of the other people around them aren't really seem like they're healthy or happy in a real positive way, that's some signs that's not that's not the person you want involved with your life, but in helping you become your best self. So just be aware of those things, that who you are is a whole combination of things, but it's very important to have a healthy sense of self or a healthy ego than not to have any ego. Like, you are you. You value you. And there's people who will try to take the you from you. And that's what we don't want. We don't want people to take the you out of us, right? To take the us out of the me out of me. They're the whatever. And people very close to you will do that. And they'll do that with good intentions even. It's crazy to think. But, that's the difference between a pet and a human. People look at their pets, rightfully so, as a part of them, because that's what the pet is. It doesn't mean they're treating the pet bad. It's, in fact, probably treating the pet well, because that's why they get spoiled. It's because we love our little animals and they're our pets. We don't try to develop the dog to go, okay, dog, you're going to go run off and live by yourself now. I've raised you. That's not the point of a of a pet. But humans are their own sovereign beings. Sovereign means to yourself. Now, you are part of a community and all, but we want those sovereign beings to go off and live their best lives, to develop into the best that they can be. The world's not perfect. You're going to have flaws. Every single person does. So don't worry about that. But be the healthy sense of you, the healthy sense of the person that you are, that God created, and that the universe allowed to exist. Whatever, however you want to think about those things. It's a special thing to be alive. I love you.